So I've been asked to do a bit of housekeeping this morning. Well, I wouldn't say housekeeping, but just to introduce the two documents that a lot of the conversation here is going to go on. So the first document is the Rwanda National AI Policy. Now, the vision of this policy is to position Rwanda as a global and continental leader in responsible AI by aligning with Vision 2050 and the Smart Rwanda Master Plan. Now, there are 5 pillars. This document has 5 pillars. No, it's not the document in front of you. So there are 5 pillars for this document: AI for sustainable development, which aims to deploy AI to improve public service delivery, education, health, and economic growth. The second pillar is AI research and innovation. The third, skills and capacity building, which aims to invest in AI literacy at all education levels. The fourth is trusted data governance. Finally, ethical and inclusive governance, which aims to ensure that AI systems align with societal values and protect rights. Now, the strategic approach really is multi-stakeholder collaboration and coordination between government, academia, private sector, international partners to drive trusted, ethical, and impactful AI development. Very nice document. I've looked at it 5-6 times since when I was informed about the session till now. The second document is the Kenya National AI Strategy. Now, this document, the vision of this document is to transform Kenya into Africa's AI hub by 2030. It has 3 pillars: AI for AI digital infrastructure, with the aim of building national cloud policy, improve broadband and robust data centers. The second is sustainable data ecosystem, which aims to improve data protection frameworks with legal and ethical oversight. The third is AI research, information, and commercialization. The aim is to support research and development across priority sectors and link academia with startups. Now, the priority sectors are the priority use cases include the identifies priority use cases for AI in healthcare, education, agriculture, and public sector. Now, both documents have some shared principles. The first is ethical and responsible AI. It's part of the core policy design of the Rwanda document and is central to the legal and governance framework in the Kenya document. There's also inclusive development, which cuts across both, then data sovereignty and trust, skills and talent development, and then collaborative governance, which I appreciate from the setup, not just of the panel, but also of the people who are here for this section, for this event. So now that I've done that work, I'm now going to hand over to my people. But again, like I said, it's a bit of an interactive section. So I'm going to ask questions. And the idea is when I ask one person, after the person has answered, the other panelists can chime in and say, okay, no, I don't agree with this one. This one should change, or this is how I think it should go better. So I will start with Immaculate. We've just spoken about the AI strategy, which was launched in 2025, the Kenya AI strategy. How does it address the data governance challenges? And what role does your office play in AI oversight?
Many times from a data governance and aspect, even though we haven't crystallized in terms of how the governance of AI should be, it's a conversation that is at Kenya. Where will it be? Do we need a specific body to deal with AI, or do you use already existing institutions to help govern AI? There has been the part of the reason, the thinking that we should first go out there and have a policy before we do anything else. It's because many times when you rush to do regulatory framework, which are also governance, you can tend to deter and become more restrictive than allow the industry to grow. Having said that, I think we can't wish away because issues around governance to make sure that we put in place the necessary guardrails for purposes of governing this new area. Because the truth of the matter is human beings given an opportunity, they'll go to extremes. So it's important for us to think how then we put guardrails to help regulate the space of AI. We haven't concretized. It's a conversation that is still happening because we said, can we focus on making sure that we start on a policy framework. Then from the policy framework, then we can begin looking through how then do we ensure that the governance aspect of AI is taken. It could be independent. It could be also centered around specific countries or a specific institution around governance could spread across government. Thank you.
Okay, so before I go on to ask the next person a question, because I'd like somebody to comment on this, I'd like to still ask you. Okay, I mean, I think you've mentioned them, the practical challenges that you've had in balancing. I mean, I think you mentioned it, but so no need to ask then. So I'd ask, I don't know if anybody has a comment on what she said, particularly practical challenges that you think one might have in regulating artificial intelligence, in balancing that with ensuring innovation. Are there any comments?
Yeah, thanks. I think one comment that Immaculate has made, which captures the dilemma, is whether as regulators, there should be one overarching regulator for AI, as opposed to having other existing regulators. And I think the approach would be that when we look at emerging technologies like AI and the other technologies that have come before then, and as Immaculate mentioned thereafter, she said that there are approaches that would tend to stifle innovation. So I think if we were to have, in my opinion, as private sector, and I'm speaking here as private sector, we were to have something like a high priest of AI in government, the issue would be that there's a saying that when what you're holding is a hammer, everything you look at looks like a nail. And because AI is so overarching and reaches so many sectors, I think the approach that we've advocated as private sector is that let all the regulators be empowered to deal with AI as it is emerging within their sectors, and let them be able to leverage existing legislation to see how they can meet the challenge of AI. Thanks.
So I'd like you to speak from a data protection point of view. What is the commission? What is the office doing in respect of protecting the data of individuals? Because we know how this thing works with data.
From a data protection perspective, one, I'll say there's an expectation under the Data Protection Act that when it comes to automated decision making, that is what covers AI. Let's start by, as an office, there are several aspects. One, from a compliance perspective, from an enforcement perspective, from an awareness perspective. From a compliance, because I know, Michael, many people here want to hear compliance. They don't want us to carry around the stick. From a compliance perspective, one of the things we've done is issued industry-specific guidance notes. And one that we're also considering to do in the sooner than later is the one on AI. What are the guidelines, like what ICO has done to guide the industry? What that does, it gives a guidance across board. This is what is expected, these are the do's, these are the don'ts. It helps in terms of simplifying what is expected in this sense of AI. From a compliance perspective, the other one would be to help institutions audit their systems, so that they're able to audit their systems, they're able to identify, even as AI is emerging, how do they ensure that data protection becomes in their AI solution by default and by design. So where they conceptualize the AI, and as they conceptualize it, how do they make sure throughout the trend of when they're coming out with solution, data protection is significant in terms of their work. The other one, of course, is awareness creation, because it's a new area, and some of the challenges when it comes to AI, it's issues around reuse of data. Because from a principal's perspective, the issue of data limitation, use delimitation, you say you only use data for a specific reason. And now when you have AI, you're reusing or getting information that you'll have to use when necessarily going back to consent. So how do you make sure that some of these principles are taken on board? So that's a compliance. Of course, from an enforcement perspective, it would be when people go beyond what is expected of them, how do you make sure that you bring back we bring them back to guardrail and ask questions. I think AI is challenging our thought process when it comes to key principles of data protection, whether it is accuracy. We have seen challenges around hallucinations, whether it is purpose limitation. We have seen people being asked, you can no longer use data for this, but we are seeing AI is saying the more data you have, the more clean the data is, the more you can have more better AI solutions. So it's challenging. And I think the challenge for us in the space of data protection, how do we make sure with this new innovation, because this was not envisaged 5-10 years ago, we are incorporating AI so that you see many jurisdictions are now coming up to say, hey, when it comes to AI, like I think Singapore just recently, they are now guiding better. I think those are the challenges and issues around data protection. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. If you're not going to clap, no problem. We'll leave it at that. Mr. Mwasaga, of course, I had mentioned earlier that Tanzania published his draft strategy for responsible use of AI. Can you talk about the key priorities and implementation timelines for this strategy, and how is your commission coordinating with other regulatory bodies to ensure the comprehensive AI governance?
Fernandez, thank you very much. I would like first to start with just a slight recollection.
Okay.
I have a PhD in supercomputing.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Interesting.
My background is technical.
Okay.
I've studied everything technical engineering, and this is the area where I am. So I'll start just a little bit about my institution. It performs two functions. One is to coordinate implementation of the ICT policy of the country, and also to promote ICT. So I'm a coordinator and I'm a promoter. So when it comes to policies, the AI strategy that we're developing, those are the tools that I'm making sure that they're used properly in our economy. I want to start from a little bit of the history, but it will take 2 minutes. I'm not going to take very far. Our country gained independence in 1961. We'll talk the perspective of technology. The technology that was used for communication at that time, it was telecommunication technology, up to 95. That's where things started to change. And the bigger reform were happening around the world because of advancement of technology and emergence of internet at that time. 2003, we had our first policy of our country, which was creating completely new thing which was not existing before. Because before that, we used to use landline phones and things like that for communication. And the major technology of that time, the reason now I'm saying this, you understand why we have arrived at AI the way we have now. So major technology at that time was intending to connect people. So networking technology was something that very popular in the beginning of 2003. And then social media started to come, especially in the emergence of smartphones. Smartphones, basically, they are the one that accelerated social media. Social media also brought one thing that they started to produce a lot of data than the way we used to have data before. Then we started to witness the issues of cyber security. So cyber security came to solve one thing, to make network secure. Then later on, we were, because of the advances of technology, we've been able to connect not only our computers and our phones, but things. We started to have Internet of Things. So Internet of Things also added a lot of data. Now we have a lot of data that we have now. Then there's another technology which came called blockchain. I think most of us, we have heard about the cryptocurrency things and things like that. The underlying technology is a blockchain, which was created for one thing, to build trust. So after blockchain, then we started to get gains of AI. But AI didn't start in 2000. AI started in 1940-something there. 3 things must be available for AI to work very well. The reason why AI is very popular now is because we have a lot of data. Other things which are supposed to be there is you need to have computation. Computation has been around since a long time ago. That's not a problem. Algorithm which works to work with the data so that we can get an insight, they were there. Of course, now we have advanced, but the key game changer is data. So now we have a lot of data. AI is used basically in all sectors. So after witnessing that, we were in a dilemma of can we start with a policy, or we start with a frameworks, or we start with a strategy. So after witnessing that there are some institutions, they've started to use AI, and basically AI is used in many sectors, we say that it's better to start with a strategy. And then we'll be monitoring how things are going there. So our strategy has 6 pillars, but in the digital transformation of the country, we look at 5 pillars. That is, we look at skills, and skills are segmentized into 3 layers. There's a basic skills, intermediate skills, and advanced skills. Basic is for everyone in Tanzania. Pillar number 2 is digital security and trust. So security part is issues of cybersecurity, make sure that all these things of AI, they're secure. Trust is built up with 2 things. One is like what my colleague here has mentioned, issue that has to do with data protection and consumer protection. So those are two key things that are supposed to be watched out. The pillar number 3 is digital telecommunication services, to ensure that everyone is having telecommunication services that are able to carry the workflows of AI. Because AI, it needs different type of infrastructure so that it can work very well. Pillar number 4 is AI economy. Of course, some other places, they call it digital economy. And of course, we all understand when you talk about digital economy, the other name is economy of the people. Actually, in AI, we are supposed to onboard all the people in the economy. People who are going to be left out, there'll be a lot of issues. And the last pillar is talking about digital research, innovation, and entrepreneurship. So when we are moving as a country, in Tanzanian perspective, that's what we are looking at. And we want to ensure that we onboard everyone. And we have developed our own digital public infrastructure, which was developed locally with the local experts, where we have interoperability system. We are rolling out digital ID number and digital payment gateway of the country. So all of these things, they are taking us to start to enjoy what we are looking at as a focus, that to attain what is called personal government. The government which talks with individual person. We have not reached there, but that's what we are aiming at. And that's all the strategies working on.
Okay, do you have timelines? Do we have specific timelines for this at this time?
When it comes to the strategy, we are going to launch it this month on 28th, and it's a 10-year document.
Okay.
And we have a lot of milestones there. But when it comes to DPI, we are almost done.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Please put your hands together for him. I wonder why you're not clapping. If I was the one, I'll be clapping from the beginning, from the first time you started talking. I'll be putting my hands together. So I'll go on to Barakuji before we come down, because there are a few questions I'd like to ask you, but let's move on. Mr. Barakuji, what progress has Uganda made in developing AI-specific regulations, and how are you integrating AI governance into the existing data protection framework?
What Uganda is doing, we haven't been focusing on having AI-specific regulations. It's the same challenge that everyone else is facing. You cannot come up with one now, otherwise it would be too early for you to capture anything. But rather what we focused on as a country, I come from the data protection regulator, but the ministry that is in charge of the policy making, that is Ministry of ICT and National Guidance, we've been working with them to ensure that the blocks which support AI are well built. Starting with participation at the continental level, the AU data policy framework, we contributed to it, making sure that the perspectives of Uganda are well captured, because it's more of an aspirational document. It's one of 2022, but we didn't stop there, but also the one of the East African Community Data Policy Governance Framework as well, which is basically talking about how do you use data, going beyond personal data, but any use of the data I'll not belabor what the previous panelists have talked about around data and its importance. So as the country, we came up with a national data strategy, having pillars closely related to the ones of the East African community, making sure that not just government, but even private sector, they look at well categorization of data, that it can be used and reused, of course, borrowing principles of data protection and privacy, especially around a purpose. Now, the other that we've tried to do is making sure that skills are built. This being a very evolving area, we are also participating in the Africa-Asia policy framework around AI. A course has been developed around, unique to the Global South, understanding AI policies, how it's used, unique scenarios. In Uganda, we had a number of them, especially at university level, and now this is also being improved. As well, there is an AI playbook which has been developed. So Uganda has made sure that the capacity of the different policymakers is actually built in that regard. It's now evolving because it's bringing in more actors, making sure that actual lessons are borrowed and how they can be replicated. So that has been the major focus for Uganda. For the data protection and privacy, but before I go to data protection and privacy, I know Michael talked about the task force, so I'll not go into that. To my right, there is also what has been done in that regard. Data protection and privacy, the law is already there. And of course, as Immaculate talked about automated decision taking, it is one of those rights which is already recognized. Now, in Uganda, what we try to do is that as part of our audits, when we are auditing these entities, we ask them if they're actually utilizing AI in their decision making and if the data subjects, the individuals, are made aware. We've seen it very common in the insurance sector where AI is actually used to come up with premiums and interest. So to make sure that it's well embedded in the regulatory framework, especially around data protection and privacy, require them to declare, and where it's not, where we conduct investigations and realize it was used and it was in a way that would compromise the rights of the data subjects. We haven't been penalizing them, but using it as an opportunity to teach them on what should be done. Data protection and privacy, the other challenge is regarding AI and how we try to balance it. Now, so many people use AI without their employers, the people who engage them, being aware. So you find someone, and we've seen some scenarios. The human resource officer receives an applications for one position, and there are 200 of them. He has very limited time. He needs to come up with a short list. He just uploads it in a particular, I'll not give a name, but I think we all know. He uploads the information to come up with a short list within seconds, and it comes up with names of individuals who even never applied. So having issues of inaccuracy. So those are some of the challenges, especially when we interface with the organizations. We tell them that using AI is not a problem, but it should be used responsibly. Because under one of the principles of data protection is fairness. Does someone expect you to use the information in such a way? So developing a policy, even if it's an internal one, we've been guiding them as part of their data governance frameworks to ensure that it is well embedded. But then there have also been other scenarios where privacy enhancing technologies, we've been advising them to use them. If you need to deploy AI in your particular systems, we've been advising that they can use synthetic data, whereby they remove those identifiers and come up with data that replicates what ideally would be personal data, but actually it isn't, and it can be used to train. As the Data Protection Authority ourselves, we've used AI, and we are using it. We, as part of our complaints handling, when we first rolled out some of the areas, convenient channels through which complaints could be received, we rolled out getting complaints through SMS and then through the online portal. Now, the SMS USSD was unpaid for. Within 1 month, we had received 1,000 complaints, and we are very few on the ground. And the law requires that we review each one of the complaints and we get back to them. Of course, we have very limited time. Complaints should be investigated within 21 days. A report is written within 30 days. And when we started going through the complaints manually, we realized that many of them were outside of our regulatory purview, but we needed to take action. So we decided to develop one which is modeled after our operations. It's commercially available, but we modeled it and we had to train it on the Ugandan law, on the different scenarios, making sure that it's
Sorry, I just want to make sure we understand. You modeled what?
Or the large language model.
Okay, so okay.
Sorry.
Yes.
It had stayed in my mind. Thank you.
Yes.
The large language model, whereby we would train it to understand the Ugandan law. And what were we aiming at? Making sure we comply with the law, for starters, because even if you're the regulator, you're dealing with data, and we are also using synthetic data. Now, the other is we had to make sure that a human is involved, because automated decision taking also applies to us as the regulator, whereby we ensure there are no inaccuracies. And when we started deploying it, because the complaints within about 2 years, they had reached almost 3 years, 10,000, but the number of staff had not increased. So what it was supposed to be doing and is making sure that it filters out which ones are within our regulatory purview and which ones are not. And we're shocked, the ones which are not in our regulatory purview, they were over 98%. You know, because it was a free service, someone would just be sending a message, I don't have lunch. Another one would wonder, do you provide money? But before the deployment, you know, it would take us a lot of time. So that's how we try to embed it within the regulatory space, not just providing advice, but then making sure even ourselves, if someone reaches out to us, they ask the regulator, how do I deploy AI? What do I need to look at? You can speak from a point of, an informed point of view on how you can deploy it, even the not regulations, but guidance that we want to develop, we'll speak to it.
Okay, thank you. Just before I go over to Mr. Bamwesige, I hope I'm getting the pronunciation well. I'd like to ask, for the purpose of the people on this panel, how can one access those? No, I'm still asking you, Mr. Baker. How can one access that model to be able to send? And I mean, of course, majority of us would not use it, but would like to see it. So is there a way that we can access maybe a URL, or how do we access it if we wanted to just look at it? Because I'm interested.
It's not publicly available because we actually use an API to connect to our complaints handling. Oh, okay. So it's locally hosted on one of our servers.
We'll discuss it privately. We'll discuss it. Okay, so
it's not publicly available yet.
So, Mr. Bamwesige, thank you very much. Please put your hands together for him first. Mr. Bamwesige, now he has spoken from a data protection point of view. So I'd like you to look at it from the UCC point of view. What is going on? How are you adapting your regulatory approach?
Thank you very much, and a very good morning to you. I'd just like to pick up a little bit about what Baker submitted. He made a very profound statement, which I think we all grapple with within our institutions. You have a scenario where you have a guy in finance that has a deadline to beat for his financial reporting, and he picks all your financial data, puts it up into a certain AI tool, generates the report, meets the deadline, done. But that data is out there. And what he said is very important, because one approach could be that you're going to block access within your network to all these AI tools, but perhaps that's not the solution. The solution would be to find ways of making it work for you as an organization. And I think that's where it comes from. How do you then localize that within your environment to continue serving the functionality of giving you that efficiency and all, but without necessarily exposing yourself to the risk of having your data out there. Yeah? So probably something for us to think about. But moving on to your question, what are we doing as UCC from the space of regulatory powers or regulatory responsibility in this regard. A couple of things. The first one is, of course, creating incentives for players within this ecospace to come within Uganda and participate in AI-driven solutions and technologies. And a couple of things we are doing there in terms of allocating the right spectrum, allocating the right resources to these players. One of the things that we've done recently is to open up a block of USSD shortcodes to players that are testing applications that are running off USSD. We have one that was developed by certain guys within the agricultural space. So it gives information to farmers deep down in villages via SMS, via USSD, in terms of weather patterns and when they should do their planting and so on. So to sort of provide those shortcodes that can be used for those purposes to support that innovation and scale it up to support a wider range of people. Of course, the other is putting in place spaces where they can test, regulatory sandboxes and so on. We do have one that we have put together to support people that are testing out AI applications within a controlled environment, and even within that space to provide data sets that have been anonymized that they can work with in terms of scaling up their applications. The other has been spoken about. We continue to participate in regional global forums where such discussions are happening, and this is one of them. We pick ideas, we share experiences. Our neighbors in Rwanda, Kenya, Tanzania have gone way ahead of us in terms of developing strategy and policies. We are picking their lessons and using them to improve ourselves as well. So we participate in these forums. Of course, the AI task force that is helping sort of conceptualize this and look at different aspects from human capital, from infrastructure, look at also specific projects that have been done already within the AI ecosystem and see how we can scale those up. The other thing that we are also looking at is to find some sort of funding to support some of these, these upcoming projects. Within the regulatory space, we do have what we call a universal access fund. So one of the things that we are thinking about is then how do we get that fund to support local innovators, especially within the AI space, for solutions that can be scaled up to a national level and we can all learn from. The other thing is we're also key on consumer rights and consumer protection. And we know that within the telecom space or the telecom sector, there have been so many AI tools or AI systems that have been developed from customer complaints handling, call centers, fraud detection, and so on. But on the other hand, also, we are keen to ensure that those are not misused, that the algorithms are not altered. They are transparent enough to ensure that there's fairness even to the consumers. But also from the consumers using these applications, there are such options as opting out when they need to opt out, but also that the escalation in some cases can be done to a human being. Because if you're escalating from one system to another, at times it becomes hard for you to draw the line. So those are some of the interventions that we are doing.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Now, before I go on to my Oga from Google, my senior man, we're going to be working together very soon. I'd like to come back to Mrs. Kusaiti, right? Pronounced well. So Mrs. Kusaiti. So while he was talking, we had like a side talk, and she wanted to complement what they said with some work that they were doing in Kenya. So.
Oh, thank you very much. Just two interventions. One, I want to make an observation that as a commission, we have also we are also using the chatbot as an AI tool, and what we use it for is for queries in terms of customer friendliness. If you log into our website and ask any question, that anything around registration and so on and so forth. That's one implementation we have done. The other one that we are looking into working, because one of the biggest challenge when implementing AI is around people are not sure So as an office, we are currently piloting how we can implement sandboxes. And that way, we will give AI an opportunity to thrive when people are able to explore how their systems or whatever product they want to experiment. That is something we're exploring as an office. Those are just my two interventions. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Do you want to add to that? Oh, I was asking you, do you want to add to it? Yes.
There is something that I wanted just to
Yes.
comment a little bit when it comes to issues of AI that we are discussing here. There's an interesting discussion that I had with someone, and who was saying that because of AI now we know we are supposed to change all of our curriculum and change all the laws. So I was asking him, but what is this thing in AI that is prompting some people to think that everything has to change? Because as far as in a technical perspective, AI is giving things some little capabilities that human being has. But the way AI is it at this particular moment, you cannot even compare 5% of capability of human being. So why all this fuss that we have, thinking that there's because the intelligence of a human being is very, very superior. And when we start to look at issues that people are feeling that AI is bringing, there are issues basically that has to do with data only. We have not started to see AI is fully autonomous, like the way we human beings are, and able to think for themselves, planning things for themselves, and things of that sort.
Okay.
So I think we need to balance a little bit about this development.
Okay, thank you. Nice insight. I have comments, but I'm just a moderator, so I will close my mouth. So I will go on to Mr. Murungi. The reason I've kept you last is where the next part of this conversation is intergovernmental collaboration, etc. And I think with your work, you are sort of like, you work with the entire East Africa. So that's why I've left you last, because your conversation leads to what everybody else is going to talk about. So from your perspective, how are you dealing with a lot of us will term patchwork framework in the sense that we have this country having it and this one doesn't have it. Doesn't have it rather. And what are the practical challenges that you face? So how are you dealing? What is your current view? How are you dealing with it? And what are the practical challenges?
Yeah, thank you. Actually, with AI, as private sector, we don't see a patchwork. I think there may be, of course, countries that have and others that don't. But I think for those that have come up with AI policies and strategies across Africa, we are seeing some very strong and robust policies across the board. In fact, at the AI Summit, Global AI Summit on Africa, earlier this year, where we met with Madam Veronica Nduva, who was to be with us, the Secretary General of the East African Community. We said that within East Africa, Kenya and Rwanda have done some great work that should not go unused by the rest of East Africa who are working on their own frameworks. And as private sector, we engaged and asked, is it possible that far from the data governance framework that the East African community is working on, can the East African community also work on some high-level standards for AI governance and AI policy that the whole of the rest of East Africa can use? And actually, this is probably a great build-up to this conversation. That's why I even asked for permission with the organizers to share this pamphlet from Google that is on your desks, because when we analyzed many of the emerging frameworks in Africa, we see that actually they are very progressive. And when we compare also with the AU Continental Framework on AI, those 10 principles, if you may refer to your pamphlet that we have analyzed here as Google, are very well reflected, beginning with Kenya's, looking at Rwanda. We see those 10 gold standards very well reflected, whether it's enhancing cloud capacity and implementing cloud-first policies. We are seeing that being very strongly emphasized, and we've had it being repeated here by the regulators who've spoken, the ability for the public in particular to utilize cloud solutions, consolidating and making public sector data publicly available. We've heard that very clearly from Uganda. And we know that one of the concerns has been that Africa may be underrepresented in the AI paradigm in the same way that we've had concerns about the divide that has existed before. And facilitating the creation of anonymized and aggregated and varied data sets in sensitive context. Becca has mentioned that Uganda is working on that. In Kenya, for example, here there's a health nonprofit called Jacaranda Health that is working on a personalized SMS AI-powered system to support expecting mothers with information during their pregnancy journey. And that system only identifies them on the back end as a unique number, not by their name, not by their telephone. And therefore, it's able to actually get data about the pregnancy journey of all these mothers and analyze it without necessarily, compromising on their privacy. I'll not go through all these, but I'll just mention that one of the 7th and the 10th principle, implementing comprehensive AI skills development for all citizens. We've seen that also as a very strong priority for governments that are working on AI policies, because without a baseline of the human capital that is going to join the AI deployment and the ecosystem, Africa may not be able to compete favorably and harness the opportunities in AI. And then principle number 8, adapting international AI standards as domestic regulatory standards. A lot of work has been done outside of Africa. And I want to mention here that when I say international includes Africa. And Africa has its place in the international space to shape frameworks for other markets, even outside of Africa. So I don't want to be mistaken by saying when I say international, I mean coming outside of Africa and into Africa, but Africa as a member of the international community is shaping. And therefore, I think this conversation and all the work that we're doing here in Africa should also benefit the work that the UN is doing and other bodies across Africa. So to answer your question, Fernandez, I don't think in terms of AI we may have a patchwork. What we have is in possibly taxing the digital economy. There's some difference in approaches. And we are urging that countries look at the OECD model of instead of every country coming up with its own digital service rate of tax for multinationals, to have a uniform system that is based on international law. The other one is data localization also. We find some countries being very protective and demanding that anybody who is providing services to a citizen in their country will need to have a data center in the country. Of course, if you imagine if other countries were to require that for our African startups, if an African startup, a Ugandan startup is looking to do business in the US, and then the US government says, oh, you need to build a data center here, I think it will be a race to the bottom. But I think we are getting to a place where our regulators see the value of cross-border data flows, and of course, see how we can balance national data sovereignty with the need to promote data and trade.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This leads us to the points that I wanted, but before I come, I just want to take one question, then come back, we'll continue our conversation. One question from the audience first.
Good morning. It's Mrs. Rashid Gabawi from Morocco. My question is, as mentioned, the data is the fuel of the AI. What's the state today of open data in your country?
The state of open data?
Yeah.
Okay.
Especially regulation and case law.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Who do you want to answer that question? Do you want to take that question? Okay.
State of open data in Kenya. I'm not government, but you asked the right person, because before I joined Google, I was working in publishing laws and case law. And this is with the National Council for Law Reporting. I think it remains, if I may say so myself, one of the areas in Kenya and in Africa where we have a complete state of open data. If you go to kenyalaw.org, you'll find that the license under which that content is provided to the public is an open public license. And it means, there are very few, even copyright restrictions, probably beyond the attribution. I'm not sure about other sectors, but I would say that in terms of data, case law, and legal information, Kenya is very open. I don't know, Immaculate might talk better about the other segments.
Okay, when she does so, then we'll have Uganda and then Tanzania respond. Oh no, let's have her first. Let's have finish. Let her finish where we started.
Okay.
She will take first and then you go on.
So, okay, go on.
No, that's a go.
Let me say, as Kenya, we embrace the principles of open data, and that is the general principle. In the implementation could be another conversation, but we've signed on to international conventions in terms of open data. The other thing I would want to interject, we know it's true that AI feeds on data. And one of the things that the Ministry of ICT and Digital Economy is keen on is coming up with a policy on data governance. And that is ongoing work. It's work that has just started, commenced. After the AI policy, we've moved on to having a framework on data on data governance. So that is something that is work that is ongoing, and it's the realization that without data we cannot then speak about AI working effectively. And then finally, there is as a commission in terms of intervention, one of the other things that we have found that is data is being is very segmented. Every institution has their own data sets. As a commission, what we've done is release the data sharing framework. It's up on our website. We just need to finalize it because we were waiting for feedback from different government institutions, because we'll find there is a lot of silos. You want health data. People in the same, in some cases, people in the same government can't access that information. So the data sharing code is supposed to also facilitate in terms of guiding how then do we share this information so that it's being useful across the entire government sector. Thank you.
Thank you. Now to Dr. Masaga.
Oh, thank you very much. That's a very good question. When it comes to open data, there are a number of phases that Tanzania passed through until we have data protection law. Initially, there was that initiative of open data. Many of us understand the main issue there was personal identified information and how to handle it at that time. But the regime of data protection has indicated very clear the responsibilities of all the players who is producing the data, who is processing it, who is stored, and what things are supposed to be done. So if you look at that law, how it has been written, it has been written to incorporate those things, but there's an issue of compliance. That is, if you are using data that has been produced by someone, you need to get a consent and things of that sort. And there are some of the regulation that you need to follow so that you can use the data as supposed to be.
Okay.
So I think things have evolved now. Most of the country, either they have the data protection law or they are into drafting it, which can cover how data is supposed to be exchanged and all other things.
Okay.
And that's the situation.
Okay, thank you. Now, I'm going to, because both of you are from the Uganda, so I'm going to go to Wamesige. So you just tell us, you answer the question from an open data, you answer from the Ugandan perspective, what's the state of open data?
Okay, I think Becca is better placed to answer that.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you. So open data in Uganda, the National Data Strategy provides for it. It was launched. It talks about indexing databases and making that list publicly available from both public and private sector. But we also have a draft open data policy. Well, it has been in draft for a while, but now we have a strategy that will be fast-tracked. Similar to Kenya, we have a law. It's called the National Data Bank Regulations. encouraging different government agencies to ensure that at least if they have information in form of databases, they grant another government agency access to it, and even private sector gradually. That way it makes data available, but most importantly, it eliminates the element of duplication of such data and around reuse. Lastly, with data protection and privacy, there is a principle that we call further processing, whereby if the information you had already collected it and you want to reuse it, should be similar to that. In there is also an aspect of information is collected publicly, what you can put in place. So the principles are there and they're being implemented. Is just the awareness and making sure that those that develop or want to use the data are aware of them.
Okay, thank you very much. So now to the issue of harmonization generally. I mean, you mentioned a company is doing services for different countries, and then sometimes in many cases you have to deal with different regulations, and that's a headache for international companies, and especially if you want to have a sort of African, in this case Eastern African businesses where we thrive generally, we need some level of harmonization, one, and also two, the issue of having each person is requesting a data center. So from a regulator's point of view, again, I'm going to go to Mr. Van Weesige because I want you to speak a bit more. What do you think the role of government is in that regard? The role of the regulators, what do you think you can do? What steps do you advise that's to be taken? What is currently ongoing and what steps should be taken?
Okay, I think there are a number of aspects that we can harmonize on. Michael spoke to infrastructure, which we can harmonize on, but from really high level. For example, ensuring that we have security across our infrastructure within this ecospace. The other is really cross-border data governance. If I come from Uganda and I am say data roaming in Kenya, those principles ideally would apply to all of us. Of course, one of the other things that we have seen as well is sort of try to incentivize, even as a bloc or a region, players that are in the private sector to support the AI ecosystem. We've seen a player in Uganda who has asked to provide GPUs as a service to support innovation within the AI ecospace. Already we are members of IACO, which is the forum for regulators or communications regulators in East Africa. And some of these interventions and policies are being discussed high level at that forum. And we hope that then going forward, we should have some commonalities in terms of principle within the region.
Okay, thank you. Doctor, do you want to continue with regulators' point of view, or you want my cousin's namesake to take on?
Of course, there's something that I wanted to talk about. It. I totally agree with what my colleague have said, but there's one thing that we need to be careful with. All these initiatives or adoption of AI should make us more independent, not dependent, because the way things are now, remember you have explained very clearly that we are building African free continental trade area. We want to use AI so that it can improve productivity in the continent. But the way things are now, most of our data are not residing in the continent. That is not state of affair that will enable to make our countries develop in the AI era. So one thing that I think that we need to do, especially when we develop all these law or guidelines, is to ensure that AI is making us as independent as possible than to be dependent like the way things are now. There's a study that I did on how dependent we are when it comes to AI in the continent. To say the truth is alarming.
I'd like a copy of that report, of that study. It's important for me. So my cousin's namesake.
Thank you. I think the challenge and one of the raw nerves or the pain points and conversation is around data localization. And this is what I'll say as from a regulator's perspective. There is a point of concern from point of nationalism that if data that is sensitive to citizenship is stored away from the country, and we have seen it's no longer news what we are seeing globally in terms of wars and our cut off cables. What happens to that country? And I think it's on that basis that as Kenya, the issue of identify strategic information was identified. And the issue so that you're able to balance between strategic and business continuity was agreed about data localization with a copy in Kenya when it comes to strategic information. Health, primary education, elections data, cybersecurity and misuse, and finance. There is a concern because the truth, from a regulator's perspective, one of the things that we find ourselves in a catch-22 is when we are doing enforcement of platforms that are not hosted within the country, not even within the region, because that is another conversation. We don't have a framework. Unfortunately, the crafters of regulatory framework globally, even in the Budapest, Budapest Convention, was focused about crime. And crime was defined as issues around money laundering, emails, so data protection and personal information was never defined. So what does that mean? It means that data protection authorities do not have what we call mutual legal assistance. So when you embark on an investigation about a platform and infringement of personal data, you hit a dead end. Because then big platform owners will tell you, you need to investigate, you need to go to a permission from a certain jurisdiction. We can't access. When you write, the holders of office will tell you, you don't have mutual legal assistance, so I can't investigate. That is a challenge, and that's a conversation. That's not to say that we don't need to make the environment in terms of business conducive. It makes no logical sense, like Michael has said, for us to be building data centers after data centers after data center. The truth of the matter is the reason why small businesses thrive, it's because it's a plug and play. If I want a small, even I want a small backup, I just need to pay 200 Kenya shillings to Google to be able to do business. So we can't run away from the facilitation and the fact that people have invested. The question for me, how do we balance and make sure that even as we do not deter business, and also how do we make sure that we are also taking responsibility when there is abuse of personal data? Because the truth is, and we know that increasingly, issues around politics and political decisions are made in those spaces. Can we deal with it? Even if we are to investigation about misuse, you cannot. That is a challenge. I think for me, that is the catch-22 in terms of where I sit on data localization. But from an African perspective, as an African conversation, let's be honest, we need to begin trusting each other that if today Tanzania is having a data center, me as Kenya, there is no reason why we should be investing on a data center. We should plug and play. Because the more we pull apart, the more we are not building a pipeline, and the more we are getting past, because we are all pulling on different directions with suspicion. I can't trust you because of geopolitics issue. Then we have an issue. We are not developing as a continent. So as we are not developing as a continent, we are giving spaces to others to tell us what to do. If we can have that honest conversation, then we are moving towards the right path. Otherwise, we'll continue playing catch up.
Okay, thank you very much. I was asking earlier if there's a question from the audience. So before we take your question, what I wanted us to talk about. So, is it possible? There are 2 points. Is it possible that we can all now say individually that would go and start pushing for some regional, for example, strategy document that allows for these things to work? We can have the conversation, go back to our respective governments and say, okay, let us have this conversation about regionalization to some extent. One, regional harmonization. One. Two, is it possible that the problems that you've referred to, if we have data, what do you call it now? No, not data localization. Data embassies. Recently there was a lot of talk. There was a lot of, I think Estonia did something like that. And then we've had, I think India, there's a lot of conversation in India about it. I'm not sure it's established now. But what if we have a regional agreement for data embassies that that ensures that the individual local laws do not apply to certain data centers? So even with the politics, we can have a regional agreement that prevents that. Will that help us in any way? And if so, what can we do about it now? I've written a paper about it, but
Yeah, well, I would like to comment on that. When it comes to data embassy, I think that is needed. It's needed very well. We work very closely with Estonia on that, and basically, data embassy is what is giving a lifeline to Ukraine to be able to survive as a government while the war is waging in their country. So African countries truly they need to embrace that. It will help us a lot. But there's something that I wanted to clarify, because remember when I started, I said my background is in supercomputing.
you told me you had a PhD in
Yes, in a PhD level. So all these things of data center, those are the things that I've studied about. There is a certain myth which is spread by private companies in Africa. And I witnessed the time of cloud computing. There are companies which you are saying to build a cloud computing infrastructure, you need millions or billions of US dollars so that you can build that infrastructure. To say the truth, that is not true. It's not true completely. And it's not true even in the era of AI. To build a data center of AI, it doesn't mean that a country has to build an infrastructure of Google or Facebook or any other these big companies. Because those companies, they are building big infrastructure because their business model or business plan is global. So they work for a lot of people. Data center, they're supposed to correlate with the number of people that you have in your country. So for example, if Tanzania say they want to build a data center in a certain region, you are supposed to build a data center of AI which will fit the type of workflow relevant to that region. Not that you're supposed to have a data center of Facebook or Google and things like that. I'm saying this because of that fear and the fact that these big companies, they've invested a lot of money. That's why we surrender our data to be stored in other place, thinking that is very expensive. We can have data center as small enough to serve a certain niche in a specific area. So if you ask me as a technical person, we need to have as many as small data center to cater for many things, and I'll explain why. My institution is developing a large language model for Kiswahili. Of course, I know there are many programs of developing large language model in Kiswahili, but language model, they define accents, the way the language is spoken. So we have our own, I know Kenya, that they're developing theirs. What we are developing what is called foundational model. It's like the foundation of any house. Once you have that, and you have those data centers, small enough, the bigger opportunity, which they say basically the opportunity is limitless, is to build verticals that they call specialized models, or some other people they call small models. In the continent, if we are not going to build foundational models with our respective governments, we will lose all the opportunities that they are in verticals or specialized models. So that's where the issues are. We need small data center. I can create a small model for a primary school teacher who is teaching English in primary school and implement in a certain region. So I need a small data center. I don't need to have very big data center. I think I've made that
Okay,
point.
thank you. I have a question about that. I think you have a comment. Don't you have a comment? You don't have a comment. I'm surprised you don't have a comment. I have a comment on your behalf, but I'm a moderator. So let's take the one question first.
My question is to the regulators. I see we've made headways in terms of regulation and benchmarking from people who have gone ahead of us. I'm just curious from an African perspective, what synergies are in our countries with other regulators in terms of how we are using AI to solve for African problems? Rather than rushing to regulate and making data the product, how is this an opportunity to solve problems that we've identified in our spaces, and there are opportunities that we are making progress on? Thank you.
Okay, did we get the question? Did you get the question? Okay, in answering that question, please, we can return. In answering that question, I want us to look at what you've said about small data centers in relation to intra-African business. The relationship, how that affects intra-African business. So, which is why I thought you would have a comment. But let's answer. So now I think he has a comment. No, make your comment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we are talking about cross-border data flows, and Immaculate gave a very good example. It's interesting how many barriers we have within Africa. I'm sure those of you who've traveled to Kenya from the rest of Africa, you may have concerns about your phone not working, having to get a new SIM card. If you ask SMB based in Nairobi, they would like to sell to Tanzania. But they will tell you right now, it's easier for them to buy something from the US, it will be here in 2 weeks, than actually to buy something from Tanzania or from Uganda and from Nigeria. Because we have so many barriers, non-tariff. And when it comes to cross-border data flows, we want to, and I'm glad that we talked about AFICTA was mentioned. If we are going to talk about promoting intra-African trade, we will need to see how our SMBs can operate in the new paradigm of AI. Already, it has become very hard for them to move goods across borders physically. Even trading digital goods now is also in danger because many of the protocols around exchange of goods, whether they are digital or not, are meeting the physical border barriers. So I think when we are promoting cross-border data flows, let's talk about how we are doing that for our SMBs, and not necessarily how we want to ring-fence Africa from other more competitive markets outside. Let's see how we can trade within ourselves, support our SMBs to move across borders easily, and to move goods and people in a way that facilitates the objectives of AFICTA. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So you wanted to answer the question? His question? Who wants to answer his question?
Regulators.
Yes, the regulator. So who wants to answer?
Okay, about regulators, regionally, we are collaborating, at least Uganda and Kenya, actually within the East African community. We have these conversations. East African community has, as we all know, 8 partner states. And of these, 7 at least have data protection laws in certain form. We've met, I think, 3 times so far. We have a forum where we meet. We met in Kenya last year, in Uganda this year, and again in Rwanda. So we meet and have these conversations within East Africa. But not just within East Africa, the Network of African Data Protection Authorities, which is a network of regulators within Africa. There are about, those who are members, about 25 plus. There is a committee on emerging technologies and AI, so these conversations are still held. In country, we have, they are informal in Uganda, where we talk to different regulators around such conversations. So that's how far, from Uganda's perspective, we've been able to collaborate and ensure that conversations on regulation of AI understanding are well appreciated.
Okay, thank you. So we are out of time. We're about at the tail end of this event. So I just want everybody, if your comment involves answering this question, fine. But I want one comment across board for about this topic, one final comment, 2 minutes, maximum 1 minute. Just tell us your final comment. She would have, no, she's last. She's going to enjoy. She's the only woman on the panel, so she's going to enjoy. She's even going to do a review because she's taking too many notes. So can we all maybe we can start from him and then we'll come to her. Final comment.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I think as private sector, we are not policymakers. We are market players. The best we can do is bring our market experience in helping to shape regulatory conversations. Case in point, this discussion. So as we are moving forward, I think we would like to recommend that the East African community comes up with a framework on high-level principles on AI that will serve as a guide to the rest of the East African member countries. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think mine would be really to make the ESC community work. I mean, we keep talking about ESC, but then it's sad to hear that even doing trade within ourselves is as complex as it can get. Yeah. So to really draw those synergies, we have laws that are really crafted around the same principles within the region. So then why is it so hard for us to work together, even with laws that are drafted around the same principles? So to build those synergies really for us and to make it work for the community.
Okay.
Thank you. My closing remark is encouraging everyone, whether civil society, government, to ensure that they get more involved in these conversations, providing solutions, but also challenging where they see something is not supporting, and then providing such solutions. Because as Africa, usually when they are having these conversations globally, we are not given a seat. And it usually starts from us here. We never contribute, whether we've not written or we haven't said about the particular topic. So encouraging people to get more involved.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. My final word is we have to adopt AI that will give us more independence, and the AI that will solve three key things. One, the issue of food security, the issue of health, and also to improve education.
Okay, thank you. So she's going to give a general, everybody's closing remark.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. I'm going to give it. But before she does so, do I have the commitment, at least, of the people on this table that we're going back home to say we want to think of how we can form a high-level regulatory framework or some sorts for the EAC? Do I have everybody's commitment? Everybody on this table. I don't have yours. You don't agree? I mean, high level, we don't necessarily have to immediately drill down to the bottom, but have that conversation and start a setup going forward. Because for me, there's no way we can compete with the rest of the world if we are not working amongst ourselves. So we can't do trade. They talk about all the trade that we could have done. I mean, it's easy. I came here and I wanted to change. I was at the bank. I wanted to change Naira to Kenyan shillings. And they said, I can't do that. So the only money I have is the dollar that I changed at the Nigerian airport. And then I changed the dollar here to Kenyan shillings, which is a problem. So we need a more collaborative approach in dealing with things in Africa. Otherwise, we're still going to be behind and far back. But I've spoken too much. I'm just a moderator. So I'm going to hand over to my cousin's namesake to tell us what we've said so far and her final points.
I'm not sure I can summarize everything, but I'll try. Fernanda, thank you very much. I think when I listen to everyone, there is convergence in terms of how we want to move forward. One, the conversation around harmonization of AI principles that are very basic at the regional level. I think a takeaway, it would have been nice if VAC was in the building, is to pick up that. But for me and Becca, because we sit in task force, they're there.
Oh, okay.
Excellent.
She's here? I wasn't informed. Okay, so the session has not
Your
ended.
Excellency, you came and sneaked in. So
her session has not ended. She's going to make a comment before the session.
I think
please go ahead.
Where the issue beyond just data governance, having harmonized law, but a principle, because then it guides the region, we are able to plug in. I think the other one is to have a conversation instead of a localizing, be thinking about data embassies as a way forward. The other issue is to look for how we plug and share lessons from across Eastern Africa. Who is doing what in terms of, we've had Tanzania is doing a large learning model on Kiswahili. Uganda has already come up is using AI as a way of studying their enforcement, and Kenya and so on. So how then do we exchange these ideas and then build on them? And then of course, finally, I think the clarion call, we should not try and live in an incubator or in a shell. We should see how we make Africa competitive for business within Africa and plug on best practices across the world. We shouldn't see the rest of the world as a competition. We need to see how we can learn from them, but also make the small medium enterprise in Kenya, Tanzania, to trade across not just East Africa and West Africa. The day a small medium enterprise can actually transact from here to Lagos without having to worry about the loss of currency, and also not having to worry about data, will it arrive on time? That is when we'll be saying we are really moving towards a one Africa that actually shares data and where AI is being embraced for purposes of building the continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Now, please put your hands together for them. So Her Excellency was supposed to make a comment before we started. She wasn't here at the time, but now that she's here, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Her Excellency Ms. Veronica Mduva. Put your hands together. Please, we'll just take a comment, maybe a few minutes of comments from you, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The Commissioner for Data here blew my cover, but I had to defend the institution. But I was enjoying following the conversations quietly, because I'm sure if I was seated here, he wouldn't have said that trade in East Africa is not working. So very interesting conversations, and I'll definitely make my remarks there. I thought we summarize everything, listen to the actors in the room, but allow me to just make some comments. And I was listening to the conversations in this room, and I couldn't help but think that this is a very well insulated bubble of data experts, tech people who really understand the sector. But for us to hack this issue, we need the policymakers in the room. Only 15 countries have ratified the Malabo Convention out of 54. When we speak about countries that have developed an AI policy in Africa, we are talking only about 12. So the question is, how do we move the conversation from the room to actions? How do we move the conversation from plans to action? So all these conversations that you're talking about here are valid. Yes, we are struggling with the issue of data sovereignty. I think the commissioner here talked about, alluded to protectionism, where we are not willing to cede ground on data centers, for instance, allowing data sharing, data interoperability, and ensuring that we have cross-border flows of the same. So how do we dissuade ourselves that we should open up, and how do we strike that balance between national interests and the regional benefits that data has to offer? So that was really a good reflection, and from where I sit, it is one of the bigger issues. But the other issue is really about the infrastructure. You know, this conversation cannot happen outside the DPI that we are putting in place, the inclusion. The other day I was looking at something, and it was showing, it was on energy and how our continent looks like at night. And it's almost 80% dark, you know. So if we do not have even the electricity, when are we going to have the conversation about data centers? If we know how much that consumes, if we do not have enough water for our households, when are we going to have enough water to cool the data centers? So the nexus with climate change is a conversation and the impact on our environment is something that those who think against it very want to have a conversation about. Then obviously the areas I also had touched here broadly on data privacy, the ethical use of the same. Unfortunately, when you talk about AI, it passes the moral compass. And I was reading about something some time back, and it was on how the data, how AI has outgrown the innovators. And how beyond the people, let's say in the Silicon Valleys and all those, and those who are developing, for instance, the basics. We know we've grown from the basic LLMs. Lillian was telling me the only LLM she knows is Low. So but beyond that, I was reading something that these innovations are beyond us. So in the sense that AI can come back and even destroy us because it has outgrown human capacity. And that is a big challenge that we have to think about. What is the risk? So from where I sit and looking at the regional economic community and the geopolitics that we have in the region, I'm also forced to think about AI as a conflict tool. So where is that conversation and what are the mitigation that we are talking about? Are our elections local anymore? You talk about data localization. Are elections local anymore, or do we have other players? How do we target that? And then I also had a conversation here. Someone mentioned about data independence. I don't think, I am of a different view. There is independence. There was an allusion that we can't be dependent, but for me, I see it as interdependent. We have to work with ourselves, but we also need to work with others so that we ensure, and I was happy, I think someone from Uganda said that they are, no, was it Tanzania? Who's doing the local language? Tanzania, yes. And that's the direction that we are really going. So how are we at the table of innovation? We should be at the table when we are developing these innovations. So I really think it's an interesting conversation. Before I make what I think my clarion call is, I'd like maybe to correct that we have intra-EAC trade growing. And yes, we have the data to suggest that the numbers have grown. From 2023, for instance, we saw a marked increase of intra-EAC trade at 16%. And the hard numbers also grew. But then also our projections are that show that over the last, not our projections, our analysis over the last 5 years show that there's an increase in volumes of about 65%. So yes, the numbers are growing in intra-EAC trade, but yes, there are also barriers to trade tariffs. We've just studying the recent finance bills, we saw some setbacks in terms of the tariffs which are there. And then, of course, regional economic communities are building blocks. So you cannot talk about the AFC FTA without talking about the ESCs and the SADCs and the ECOWASs, because that's where the trade happens. So the question is, how do we facilitate trade at that level to come all the way down? And that's what we are doing as regards digital innovation, is the payment systems. How do we ensure that there's cross-border cash flows by making our systems interoperable, being able to make our currencies accessible across board, and that has really remained to be a challenge that we hope we can unlock. We know there's progress made with PAPS. East Africa has the East Africa payment system, but we still have a few countries, including Kenya, that hasn't done the national switch to enable us to move to regional switches. So that's a conversation that we are following. So for me, this is my bottom line. I make remarks, I guess, in the big hall, but this is my bottom line. I'm increasingly concerned that AI is moving. This is a force that we cannot push aside. So how do we join the bandwagon? How do we ensure everybody who matters is vested of this and is aware that this is happening and that we have to harmonize we have to regulate, we have to put in place our data protection laws, but we have to skill and tool the generations and the people who are in this sector to ensure that we are part of it. So the biggest observation that I have when I look, so East Africa, only Rwanda, Kenya, with an AI strategy, Rwanda, very advanced in health innovations, for East Africa, in Kenya, Tanzania, using surveillance for agricultural innovations. Quite a number of innovations, but still low uptake in some other countries. So for me, the clarion call, even as we are all here, let us ask ourselves, how do we move the conversation from you, the actors in the room, the PhD holders, to those people who are making the decision? How do we escalate up? Because if we do not make everyone aware that disinformation is a thing, deep fakes are a thing, knowledge. My 13-year-old came the other day and he was very upset. He said, my teacher is using AI to teach us. It's like he's using ChatGPT to teach us. So what is the future of education? And what do you use? So I think there's a lot of nexus between the digital adjustments. I love the theme. And how do we adjust ourselves to the disruption that we cannot run away from? So thank you so much for your kind invitation.